Is it not what you wanted? Aints asked coolly, suppressing his anxiety. If it wasn't what he was hoping for, that was no problem. He had already rehearsed a response. And no, it's not that. I can read it. Oh, I see. Aints took the book from Fluda's hands and flipped to a random page. This chapter is about the heterogeneity that occurs in a soul when transforming into a lick. It made sense that Fluda couldn't read it. It was in Japanese. But it's less like a fantasy novel than a collection of lore for a fantasy world. What did heterogeneity even mean? It was something about what happens to souls, but it was a wall of hard words. He couldn't process it. It felt like he was just looking at the surface. Maybe it was purposely written so that even if you could read it, you couldn't understand it. Basically, it was something occult. Yes, it was definitely related to the occult. To Satoru Suzuki, who didn't have any knowledge of such things, it seemed like random nonsense. But maybe it was borrowed from some place's mythology. If Tabula Smaragdina were around, he would have filled him in on all the details. Oh, when Fluda looked at him with so much joy in his eyes, he felt guilty. Oh right, I only have one of these, so I can just give it to you, but go ahead and use it. Aints placed a monocle on top of the book and handed it back. When Fluda put it on, he flipped through the pages in a tizzy. This is it. This means that souls are like the spray from the flow of the vast world. All souls are the same regardless of size, which means, he has gone insane. The change in Fluda was so abrupt that Aints nearly recoiled in surprise. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He was snorting like an animal and seemed like he might pounce at someone any second. How is it? Fluda's eyes rolled to look straight at Aints. It's wonderful, master. This is exactly the knowledge I've been hoping for. Ha 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 ha. Perhaps Aints' shock from the old man's mad racket surpassed a certain level. His psyche abruptly calmed. Oh, then I'll start by taking the glass back. What? But translating the book is part of your training. It's by deciphering and understanding that text that you'll be able to ascend to the next realm. Using the glass would be meaningless. This is quite unexpected. Would you allow me to read through it once first? If you want to read one page, that's fine, but if you read any more, it won't contribute to your growth. Fluda snapped the book shut and closed his eyes. After nearly a minute, he finally opened his eyes and spoke. His voice was utterly tranquil. Understood. I shall adhere to your teachings. But master, if there is something I don't understand, will you lend me your wisdom? Sure. If I understand it, I'll help you. Thank you, master. Fluda removed the monocle and returned it. Yes, now I won't hear anything from Fluda for a while. Oh, but I do have to give him one stern warning. What am I supposed to say again? Aints struggled through his memories. Then he called Fluda's name in a heavy voice that he felt was fitting for a ruler. Fluda. Yes, master. I trust you, so I gave you this book of hidden knowledge. Make sure it doesn't end up in a third party's hands. That goes for any notes you take while deciphering it too. Don't tell anyone a thing about this book. I won't, master. I am sure the reason why goes without saying, but this book contains knowledge beyond what humans should know. If others learn of it, there will be trouble. Well, there might still be some hope if the person who got it had your kind of ability, but in any case, I don't want to still be cleaning up after you 10 years from now. Of course not, master. I won't leak any of the information I learn from these pages to anyone. I promise. I'll trust you, Fluda. Don't disappoint me. I won't, master. Fluda had gotten out of his chair and now prostrated himself on the floor. Aints thought you don't have to go that far, but he supposed it must have been an impressive threat. He was satisfied that his 10 hours of acting practice and voice exercises had paid off. That's fine then. If you understand, I have nothing else to say on the subject. Now back in your seat. I get that it's awfully difficult to decipher an unknown language without any assistance. Do you have any ideas what to do about that? Yes, master. It's terribly inefficient, but there is a reading comprehension spell. I think I'll use that and go bit by bit. Oh, I see. That's wonderful. That was the best answer Aints could have hoped for. It would be a decent challenge and buy him time, but it wasn't so difficult that Fluda would give up. Then I'll give this to you. Wait, right. I'll lend you a box to keep it in. I don't imagine you'll be reckless with it, but this is just in case someone tries to steal it from you. Aints took a box out of his storage space. It was the same sort of box he used to keep his notebook. If you keep it in here, it will take a while to open even if it gets stolen. If someone steals the password along with it, there would be no point, but just be careful. Of course, master, I would never give away the password. Good. Aints turned his gaze from Fluda, who was happily caressing the book, to the ceiling. He needed to remember what else he had to talk to him about. Oh right, they hadn't finished discussing Fluda coming to be with him, since his defection was out of the bag. First of all, when can you come? Whenever you wish, master. I have nothing tying me to this country. Aints moved his mental eyebrows. Was this personality someone who would readily cast aside the responsibilities of his position acceptable? Aints was worried he might do the same thing under his command. He subtracted points on Fluda SR sum with a red pen. Fluda, I intend to have you involved in the development of magic in the Nation of Darkness, but we won't release any of the spells you develop to the outside world. They LLB for you, me, and those close to me. Can you tolerate that condition? Can you give up your desire for fame? I have no problem with that. I'm happy if I can peer into the depths of magic. I have no other desires. As Fluda made that declaration, Aints kept a close watch on his face. Aints didn't have a gift for seeing through to the true nature of people. In terms of humanity, Fluda was a genius caster. He had lived far longer than most people and been involved in running a huge empire. Fluda was certainly ahead of him. If Fluda was to try to trick Aints, there was no way Aints would be able to see through it. But Kunti is different from 1T. Aints observed Fluda with that in mind. He eventually said, "That's fine then. I'll give you full privileges when you arrive in the Nation of Darkness. I'll support you in developing magic as much as I can." Now then, this meant he had an additional human supporter of Nazarick. He already had the Belair family. Once he could get the woman Demiurge and Albedo recommended, the strengthening of Nazarick would proceed nicely. He had to get as strong as he could before his invisible enemy revealed itself. His opponent had a world item. He needed to acquire powers that didn't exist in Yggdrasil as soon as possible. He had to assume that anything he could do, his opponent could do as well. But there was one problem: how to protect the Empire. Demiurge thought the Empire was a latent enemy, but Aints didn't agree with him. He wasn't sure what the future would bring. He didn't think conquering the world with might alone was the smart way to go about it. If the Nation of Darkness gained a reputation for destroying all its enemies, it would antagonize countries that could have been allies. So how about deepening the friendship between the rulers, Aints and Jerkniv, and conveying that to their retainers? Then Demiurge and the others will keep their conquer by power plans to a minimum. That's a great idea. A friendship across national borders. In other words, a friendship across guilds. Friends, huh? Aints' grotesque friends came to mind. Still, how do you make friends? Giving someone what they want probably isn't the right way. The best approach is probably to protect what's important to Jerkniv the Empire. There's a good chance my enemy will target it. Aints had an idea of what he would do if he were the invisible enemy who had brainwashed Sholtia. It entailed the worst-case scenario would be if Nigurath was used on the capital of the Empire, my ally. No matter who did it, they would definitely blame me. And then they would work to spread word of it all over the world. That would slow the expansion of the Nation of Darkness' influence. Aints remembered his days in Yggdrasil. Once, it was foolish to challenge a huge guild head-on, so they had incited a bunch of smaller guilds to start a war. It should be possible to use the same tactic in this case. If Aints was in the opposite position, he would surely do so. That meant there was a good chance his opponent would. In order to thwart that plan, Aints had been thinking to casually spread the rumor via Fluda that he would never use that spell again, though it was a lie. But he couldn't use Fluda anymore. He had to come up with another way. This is like trying to devise a way to prevent people from smuggling in a palm-size hazard. Maybe he should order Demiurge to come up with a plan. But would he think that's weird? Arg, he didn't know what to do. The best would be if he could just have those two do everything for him. But all that would do was put his image as an absolute being into question. He would be in trouble if he couldn't come up with a solution that also protected his reputation. Master, is something wrong? Fluda, I want to protect the Empire for a while. Do you have any ideas how to do that? Why do you want to do that? Conquering it would be easy, but I am not interested in being king of a mountain of rubble. I want to annex the Empire in pristine condition. To that end, I want to prevent any harm being done to the Empire as a result of the loss of power it will experience with you gone. The amount of wrinkles on Fluda's face increased. That's a tough question. Even with me gone, I don't think there is any immediate danger to the Empire. That said, it's true they don't have anyone to fill the gap I would leave. If there's no issue, then I'll stay here for now. Will you? I'll debate it on this end and get back to you at a later date. Yes, master. Oh, lastly, there are two things I'd like you to do for me. One thing I want is detailed information about the Martial King, and then there's the Death Knight thing. Just before the appointed hour, Aints used detection magic. Usually he would use several counter spells first, but he didn't want to waste many scrolls. Unlike that time in the graveyard, where there was clearly an enemy, he cast it on its own. He did take care to do it in a place where he wouldn't involve anyone else if he did get hit with a counterintelligence spell. He could see a place different from his current location. It was the interior of a carriage. He manipulated his field of vision to look outside, then he used greater teleportation to go there. Having succeeded without any hitches, he opened the door to the carriage. Ainzak, sitting inside, looked surprised. Without paying any attention to that, Aints climbed into the carriage, shut the door, and cancelled the invisibility spell he had been using. So it was you, Your Majesty. I somehow had the feeling it was true. Do you mind not coming in invisible anymore? If I wasn't invisible, someone would see me. You wearing that mask, so I think you all right. Maybe, but I use teleportation magic. I want to avoid as much trouble as I can. That's true. If you understand, then let us get going. Yes, let us. The carriage went through the open gate and stopped where the guard indicated. It was a place where multiple carriages could be parked. All right, let us go. Aints followed Ainzak out of the carriage. A maid and an old man dressed like a butler were waiting there. He may have been a butler, but he didn't have Seba's depth of character. He gave off the vibes of any sophisticated elderly man. The butler seemed to be human, but the maid was not. She had ears that weren't human, but animal. Aints couldn't tell for sure because of her hair, but there didn't seem to be anything where human ears would have been. Her face was cute, but it was different from human cuteness. It was more primal. We've been waiting for you. Sir Ainzak and Your Majesty, the King of Darkness, I believe. My master is expecting you. I'll lead you to him, so would you kindly follow me? Wah, Ainzak yelped slightly at the butler's question. He hadn't spoken of Aints' identity the previous day, so he must have been shocked that the man had guessed it. But Aints didn't find it so surprising. He may have been wearing his mask, but he hadn't changed anything about his clothes. Anyone with connections had probably heard of him. More importantly, it was rude to leave the man hanging. I appreciate it. We'll follow you, Your Majesty. The butler bowed and the maid followed a beat later. As they set off after the pair, Ainzak spoke to him in a low voice. Thank you, Your Majesty. Aints figured it was for replying to the butler before. He considered saying, no worries, but he simply accepted it in silence. From Satoru Suzuki's point of view, he was a boss covering for a subordinate's mistake. Ainzak's gratitude was natural. As a boss thinking of his subordinate's future growth, he wouldn't shove it aside. Being a boss is no cakewalk. He felt the struggle keenly. Suddenly he realized that since he was role-playing a ruler, he hadn't said a heartfelt thank you in quite a while. At some point, he should gather the Guardians well, all the NPCs, and express his gratitude and acknowledge their work. With those thoughts on his mind as the ruler of the Great Tomb of Nazareth, aiming to be a well-respected organization, he kept walking after their guide without pause. What a surprise to see a rabbitman, Your Majesty. Aints thought she should have said that after she was gone, but he was curious, so he continued the conversation. Not a rabbit woman? No, well it's because the race is rabbit men. Ainzak, what am I supposed to do if you take a little joke so seriously? She must have come from even farther east than the City-State Alliance. They were quite rare. Aints didn't know how far east of the City-State Alliance that was. He hadn't acquired that much information yet. He had never seen a rabbitman in the kingdom. He hadn't seen one anywhere else in the empire either. Even if other races didn't reject her, it couldn't be easy to live where there were no other members of her own race. He was curious to hear what she had to say, but he couldn't risk triggering her. Before long, they were led into a room. Please go in and wait here. Inside, a number of weapons and pieces of armor had been oiled and were on beautiful display. Not a speck of dust could be found. When Aints took a closer look, he noticed that most of the armor was scraped and dented. The pieces had definitely been used in combat. This wasn't like a weapon merchant's display. It was more like a collection of gear representing the master of the house's glorious memories. After a cursory look, Aints returned to the first sword. It was the nicest sword in the room. It didn't have any scratches. Given that it was placed to naturally catch one's eye upon entering, it had to be its owner's favorite. Does it please you? Yeah, this is quite a good collection. The owner of the room, the master of the house, stood before two sofas facing each other in the center of the room. Aints answered his question. The man had a substantial physique. His hair was cropped so short, skin was visible underneath. They continued their discussion of the arms without introductions. Which is your favorite? Oh, that one, right. That's what everyone who enters this room says. Aints crossed the room and stood before the sword. Can I try holding it? Of course, I don't mind. Aints thanked him and picked up the sword. If he tried to equip it, he would drop it. But just holding it was no problem. As he admired the blade, he noticed letters carved into it. He had seen the strange characters somewhere before. He frantically sifted through his memories. Before long, he arrived at the answer. Runes. Oh, I expect nothing less from the King of Darkness. You know them? What? They actually are runes. Does this world just have runes too? As far as he knew, runes were old characters from Satoru Suzuki's world. If they existed here, someone from the other world had brought them. Aints answered carefully, well, I only know of them. I don't have the ability to create items inscribed with them. Which of the master craftspeople made it? Oh, what an astute question. This sword was made by a rune artisan from the dwarf country in the Azalizia Mountains. It was probably made over 150 years ago. The blade can harbor lightning. Do you see the symbols carved into the handle? The master of the house came next to Aints. When he stood there, a strong scent of cologne hit Aints' nose. It's from one of the most famous dwarven rune workshops, Stone Nail. Dwarven rune workshops. I should collect more details on that. Oh ho. That sounds like a very famous workshop. Are there any other pieces from there? Aints scanned the room and the man laughed good-naturedly. Ha 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 ha. Not here, there aren't. I have them stored elsewhere. But this sword is the only one this enchanted. Oh ho. Aints hid his disappointment with an exclamation of awe. Still, he had picked up the name of the workshop, Stone Nail. He needed to investigate and see if there were players there. I've heard that weapons made by dwarven crafters don't come to market very often, and yet you have pieces besides this one. Aints mentally gave Ainzak a thumbs up for his question. That's right, Ainzak, the man grinned. Whenever one goes up for auction, I make sure to attend. Last time I dueled a stubborn adventurer and ended up paying 3 times what I planned. Ainzak shook his head slightly in amazement, while Aints nodded, thoroughly impressed. That's what collectors are like. No one understands them, and sometimes they can even understand their past selves. Aints wanted to examine the sword much more, but he put it back. I was captivated by this fantastic piece before we even really introduced ourselves. I hope you'll forgive me. The man's face was all smiles. You've got away with words, Your Majesty. Allow me to properly introduce myself. I am Osk, a humble merchant. The other merchants in the Empire get upset if you call yourself humble. I am Aints Ulgaun, King of Darkness. There isn't a day I don't hear your name, Your Majesty. Please have a seat. I'll have some drinks made. I appreciate the offer, but I am all right. Osk's beady eyes were small compared to the rest of his face, and he squinted at Aints with them. Your Majesty, I've heard the rumors. Would you take off your mask? If the master of the house asks, then I suppose I have no choice. Aints removed the mask, revealing his actual face. Osk didn't appear to be surprised. His eyes were so tiny that when he smiled, it was impossible to look into them. Oh, I see, I see. Osk spoke again after nodding a few times. Actually, given the rumors, I was worried if I could find tea to your liking, but I guess I didn't need to worry about that, he said cheerfully, shaking his stout belly with laughter. So Osk, why did you think His Majesty was with me? It wasn't hard to guess, right? If you, the head of the Adventurers Guild in the conquered city of Erantal, are coming with someone superior to you, there's only one person who comes to mind. He continued, there was a chance it was his right hand, but I just had a hunch. Can I ask the next question? Are the weapons lined up over there ones you have used? Osk smiled, clearly amused by Aints' question. Your Majesty, look at my physique. I may have held tools for making calculations, but never a sword. These weapons are my hobby. I've admired the strong ever since I was a child, and I've always liked swords and other weapons. I see, may I ask you a question? I've heard that Your Majesty possesses incredible power. Have you been alive very long? Well, you must have been, right? Compared to the lifespans of you humans, yes. After he said it, he wondered what sort of being Aints Ulgaun, King of Darkness, would become. He couldn't very well have said, no, you guys are older. Even if he could have, they wouldn't have believed him. So he was creating the character of the King of Darkness as he went. Pretty soon he had to make some decisions, or he would run into trouble. So far we know that he lived a long time, since he an undead.